Okay, welcome back to episode 20, part 2. Have you seen our exciting new Speedway Experience Day giveaway as launched this midweek on our Facebook page? Please give us a follow if you don't already. 360 Speedway have teamed up with the Amateur Motorcycle Speedway Academy, AMSA, to offer a monthly giveaway of an all expenses other than travel to get there, of course, paid place on a full Speedway Experience Day on the Scunthorpe mini track. By intention, that the idea is to try and encourage some kids. We're trying to get some new blood into Speedway. Wouldn't it be nice if 360 Speedway and the AMSA could surface a few youngsters who are quite keen to embark on a Speedway career? So ideally we would like youngsters to win this opportunity, but it is open to all. So if you've never thrown your leg across a Speedway bike, or you've never experienced the Speedway experience courtesy of the AMSA at the Scunthorpe mini track, then this is open to you. Please refer to our Facebook post, our competition post on Wednesday the 3rd of September for full details. Okay, gents, let's motor on then and do what we're here to do, which is to talk Speedway. However, just before we get into the first discussion topic tonight, our old friend down under in far-flung New Zealand has been in touch. Al Priddy. Hello, Al. G'day, Al. Thanks for getting in touch. And Al made us aware that we've got a bit of a responsibility, guys, because Al is about to embark on a 7-hour each way, therefore a 14-hour round trip from North Island all the way to Wellington in South Island, and Al would quite like to spend his whole 14 hours listening to 360 Speedway chat. So we've got a little bit of pressure to try and keep Al awake and keep his eyes on the road and keep him alert and all that good stuff. But Al has also taken the opportunity just to ask a couple of questions. So there's a couple of questions now, and then we'll pick up another couple in part 4 of this episode. So right here, right now, 2 questions. Al has asked the question, could your ex-riders on the panel identify the hardest, toughest riders that they ever met on track? Carl Johnson, you prepared to identify your nemesis?
Yeah, the hardest that I think probably the hardest that I've rode against back in the day would have been. It probably would have been for me. One of the juniors, Colin Thorpe. Yeah, was when I was at Mildenhall. It was probably I had a couple of ding dongs with Colin Thorpe, who was up and coming. He's a bit older than me, but he was coming through, and he was pretty damn tough. Pretty damn tough on me, being the younger boy. But yeah, we had a few good battles over the years. We sort of come up through the junior ranks, so whenever we met, it was always a bit of a toughie. But yeah, all's fair in love and war, as they say.
Whatever happened to Colin Thorpe, Carol? Any idea?
I tell you what, I don't honestly know. He reappeared a few years ago, and that's it. I haven't heard anything from him before that, and since then. So it's, I really don't know. But he was a decent rider.
Let's appeal to the 360
again. Same as.
Let's appeal to the 360 followership. So Colin Thorpe, if you're out there, if anyone knows what became of Colin Thorpe, or anyone could tag Colin Thorpe into this discussion, I wonder if Colin Thorpe remembers Carol Johnson, because Carol Johnson certainly remembers you, Colin. Lawrence, what about yourself? Back in your recent days, Lawrence, was there any particular riders that were a bit of a thorn in your side, or gave you a particularly hard time on track?
Yeah, I think Martin Dixon was always a hard charger. He was always. I mean, a lot of those Northern boys. Oh my God, who can forget the likes of Rob Grant and Ren Barrington Lock, and I mean, you were just sort of you were quite concerned when you went up that place. They were all really hard, weren't they? And the shape of the track and the dirt on it was just it was a awe-inspiring place to go. But yeah, Rob Grant he was a notable rider up there. But the bit that I think the hardest rider of all was, and he's still a quite good friend of mine today through sort of a shared love of old cars and that sort of thing, was Rickard Helson.
Oh yeah,
that bloke. He had eyes in the back of his head. He knew exactly where you were coming from. Ran the outside. He'd cut you this way and that way. He was the original, I don't know if you remember, the original leg off side of the bike, like John Cook.
Yes.
He was one of the original sort of cowboys like that. But yeah, some ran Powder Hall, some of those in the big, deep days of Powder Hall and that, you know. And I had some great races, I think they're on YouTube as well, with him and Jono and that, and ran Long Eaton as well. But he just knew, he seemed to know one of those guys who knew exactly where you were going, where you were coming from, you know, and he'd block you off and ride you up. But and of course, back then he was still in his sort of later days as well. So he was a wily old character. He knew all the tricks and trades. So
wasn't it Rickard?
I think Rickard was one of the. He'd only done world finals and everything, hadn't he?
Yeah, well, wasn't it Rickard Lawrence that done some truck racing as well?
I don't know. Yeah, he could well have done. He's you know, he's well into the cars, you know, custom and hot rods and that sort of thing. I'd catch up with him some of the car scene and the shows and around here because he's not far away. He's sort of towards Norfolk way.
Okay.
So I still see him today. I think he's not been too well lately. Hope he's feeling okay. But yeah, I still see him today and always remind him and we have a laugh about the good old days there, mainly when he was at Long Eaton and I was at Edinburgh. So I think there's no worse rider to come up against than him, really.
No tougher opponent than Rickard Helson. Rickard Helson, if you happen to be looking in, listening to Lawrence talking about you, then you're well remembered amongst the Speedway community. Even a young man like me remembers you, Rickard Helson. Stuart McDonald, same question to you.
Right.
Well, back in the day, like Cal says, I had a few good tussles with two riders that. So there was two riders that I used to have nightmares with, and Roman Matusek was one of them, and believe it or not, the other one was Phil Morris. So myself and Roman used to have a nibble at each other every time we raced against each other, and he was a nightmare to race against. Roman was an absolute nightmare because he had no fear. He didn't care at all who he went through, and whatever was in front of him, he would go through to get to the front, you know. And then a little bit later was Phil Morris, surprisingly enough. I had a couple of tough meetings with Phil. I think there was one meeting that we actually had at Armadale where we almost came to blows off the track. There was a few choice words between the two of us. But listen, it was all in great humour back then, but definitely Roman Matusek and Phil Morris, very hard to race against. And let's say, just for myself, a nightmare. Roman was just an absolute nightmare, it really was. And what a rider as well, you know, on the world scene, World Championships, World Cups, Czech Republic, you know, phenomenal. But honestly, a nightmare to race against.
I'm just thinking, whatever happened to Phil Morris?
You didn't offer to fight him then?
You know what, Carl, I did. I did. We had a meeting at Wolverhampton, Carl. Myself, James Greaves, it was Roman, and I think it was Scott Smith that used to be at Cradley. Remember Scott?
Yeah.
And he cut me up in the track. So I came in after the race, took my helmet off, which was a mistake, ran towards him. He was on the opposite side of the pits and he started running towards me, Carl, with a hammer. He was coming towards me with a hammer. And that's when I realised I shouldn't have took my helmet off. So I quickly about turned and ran back, and I think it was Big Martin, Peter Callis' mechanic, Big Martin Pedley, who stood in front of me, and I went, "Go on, Matt, keep him away." Honestly, I had a hammer in his hand, no fear whatsoever, and that's when I realised that I'm not going to do that again with Roman, definitely not.
Do you remember the 4-team tournament where he launched into the crowd?
He jumped the safety fence.
Safety fence. He did it at Sheffield as well.
Yeah, the guy in the crowd, someone gave him some abuse or something. He wouldn't have none of that.
Wow.
And I think that crash is online somewhere at Oxford. He had where he caught his footrest at Oxford on the start gate. and he launched off his bike, and he was halfway into the first turn. He literally went from the start gate, came out of the third and fourth turn, drifted wide a bit. He was winning, and the footrest caught. Obviously, no fold up footrest then. Caught on the start gate or the fence, that area there, and literally came off the bike over the start line and ended up literally into the first turn. The guy must have gone about 50 metres. I mean, crazy. Got up, brushed himself off. Medics came along. Yeah, went back to the pit, saved for the next race.
Incredible.
No, it was unbelievable.
You won't want to arm wrestle him.
No.
Didn't he used to arm wrestle people in the beer tents at the grass tracks and all the broad? It means abroad. He arm wrestled for pints, did he, in the beer tents in the evenings?
Wow.
Crazy.
Oh dear. Right, listen. One more question from Al Priddy. I'll ask the question. You know, for Grand Prix riders or top riders, does a rider of that standard tend to refresh their equipment from season to season? And if they do, how do they tend to move on the current stock? How do they sell their equipment? Because Al says that you never see any Speedway equipment being advertised anywhere. Lawrence, do you have an insight?
I know. We're talking a different worlds really, but I know when I first sort of start to come out the junior ranks and into the Ryehouse and Edinburgh. I know I had bikes off Jeremy Doncaster, so he was sort of moving off his old stuff, and obviously, and he was a top, he's world class rider at the time there. So I know I had stuff off him. So people would sell it on. And back then we had the guys will know here. You had a lot of junior teams that followed the first teams around. So there was a lot more riders then to sell bikes off. And that would help the younger guys. Affordable, get something that was sort of maintained pretty good and a sort of certain level to progress up.
I imagine, Callum, sure that there must be some sort of
trade sort of thing, but
yeah, there must be some sort of internal rider market, right? I mean, riders don't go advertising their stuff too often, do they? They don't need to. They'll sell to juniors or teammates or whatever it might be, right?
When I was racing, Derek, it was you used to go and ask the riders at the end of the season if they were selling their bikes, because you wanted the riders that were on the first team's bikes, and rarely they had to advertise them, Derek, because you can imagine what it was like when Robert Nadge finished the season, or Nigel Crabtree, 10-point average. Everybody wanted their bikes, so I remember people queuing up for these bikes when they were finished at the end of the season. And you can imagine yourself, you've got Grand Prix riders there that have got bikes that are absolute top notch, and there'll be boys below them that maybe not as talented that'll be wanting these bikes, because obviously they've seen them race them, and that's the way it was back then. Again, it was just, let's go and ask the riders if they're going to sell their bike, which avoided any sort of advertising, because you've done it yourself during the season.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Stuart. So there you go, Al. There's some answers and a bit of discussion around a couple of your questions. We'll pick up another couple of your questions when we talk when we reach part 4 of this week's episode. Okay, let's now crack on and pick up the first Fans Pulse discussion topic as voted for by the 360 viewership. We're going to something which might be controversial. I'm not sure, but you can decide. But we're going to ask and have a little bit of a chat around: are too many riders taking advantage of British Speedway? So guys, the more international that Speedway has become for an ever internationally mobile population of riders, there's now more Speedway riders jetting around Europe and riding in different leagues than's ever been the case. Let's be honest, and we're not now just top of the tree level, right? It's much more modestly able riders tend to pick up team berths on the continent. So maybe that trend plays into raising the probability that from time to time, some riders will appear to deprioritise British Speedway. So sometimes it can be meeting clashes, and that might not be the fault of the rider, of course, but they will favour or appear to favour a continental fixture over a British one. Or sometimes, as was the case fairly or unfairly, adjudged this season with Ben Cook. Ben picked up that wrist injury and decided to make his racing comeback on the continent. Now Ben made the case that he was trying out his fitness on a continental track because it was easier to ride and less bumpy and less aggressive a race surface than you would typically find here in the UK. So that's the type of thing that the type of scenario that supporters in particular, will adjudge certain riders to be taking advantage a little bit of British Speedway. Carol, to bring you in first, if you don't mind, I'm sure you will have encountered, you might even have suffered from something in that area, Carol, in your role as team manager at Peterborough, perhaps.
Yeah, I think, yes, there are riders, I think, that take advantage of British Speedway and use it as an extra payday to fill the time and the days just to, and we've spoke about this before. I do think there's riders that are in that position. Obviously with Ben, I think I've worked with Ben. I know Ben. I was the one that brought him in at Peterborough, so I spoke to him. I get on well with Ben, and he's genuine. I can understand from his point of view. The tracks in Europe, we've spoke about it, are slicker than UK tracks. Kings Lynn is renowned for being really grippy because of the clay content, which does put pressure on the wrist. It's a hard track to ride. So I can kind of see where he's coming from that point of view. Yes, I can see where the supporters see it as, okay, he's riding in Poland, but he's not riding in the UK. It's a tough one. He's trying to gain his fitness. He wants to earn his money. Obviously, Polish tracks pay more money when they pay, but they pay more money. And to come to the UK, yes, he's in the team in the UK and he should be here. But I can also see if it puts him back a month, through his rehab of riding, then that's not ideal for him. And I can see from the supporters' point of view and obviously from a team's point of view, if I was team manager or promoter, obviously, it'd be difficult. It's a difficult situation. Obviously, they got a facility to cover for him, which was good. But sometimes you wouldn't get that facility if he's riding in Poland. You wouldn't get a facility in the UK. But there's obviously a genuine reason. Ben he's pretty genuine, to be fair, and there's other riders that I would look at if they said that and go, yeah, you're having somebody's leg up. But with him, he's pretty genuine. He's an Aussie. They want to ride. They want to race. That's what they're here for. They're racing bikes. They come, they fly halfway across the world to race Speedway, and they want to race. And not just ride. These boys want to race. The Aussies want to be the best of the best. They want to be world champions. Like Paco said, he said earlier, he wanted to be, one of the world's best riders. He's not quite there. That's their attitude as well. They want to be the best, so they're riding, in the best leagues. If he has to spend a bit of time in Poland for his rehab and not ride in the UK, then sometimes probably we have to accept it if it's genuine. And and he's back now and he's been riding well. Obviously, it's finished. But he finished the season pretty strong for them. So it's just disappointing for them that obviously he missed the integral part of the season for them. And I think, his loss was a big loss to Kings Lynn.
Yeah, I would agree, Caroline. I've got some sympathy with Ben Cook's situation. I did example him, right, because it was one of the more recent examples of what we're talking about. And, he did receive a ban and all that good stuff, which suggested that he had done something wrong, right? But, I do have sympathy with Ben's rationale, that to make a racing comeback and try out that injury on some of the smoother, bigger, wider tracks in Poland, for example, would have made more sense than trying to do that at a Wolverhampton or a Birmingham or something like that. Lawrence, just an observation, because I don't know if what I'm about to say is correct or not, but I know we're in British Speedway and we read about riders being suspended from British Speedway for this type of thing, but I'm not aware of any foreign rider or a British rider being suspended in Poland or in Sweden or in Denmark for missing their domestic fixtures in favour of a British one. Is that Am I right? Am I being a little bit unfair to British riders or to foreign riders in Britain?
No, I think that's fair to say. I mean, I think most of the guys are pretty genuine. You like to think they were, you know, but and Poland is sort of, like Carl touched on really there, the Polish influence is so big, you know, and got bigger over the years. It's hard maybe not to have a little bit of favouritism, but no one seems to. The suspensions only maybe seem to go one way if they do. But no, so I'm not sure. It's a tough one, really. I have to give the people the benefit of the doubt, and I don't like to think everyone's pretty genuine. But I think Carl really summed most of that up, really.
I think you probably did. Big Matt, you know, so many overseas riders, Scandinavians, Aussies, Americans, are offered team places within British Speedway, and so very often, it's British Speedway, it's Britain who give them that career break and the track time that they need to establish themselves and develop themselves within the sport. But it does seem equally that it's British Speedway which appears to be deprioritised in favour of overseas leagues and overseas clubs. I just wonder if naturally that is more to do with market forces and earnings potentials. It's really that. It's really British Speedway's position in the pecking order. Is that really what is at play here? And riders aren't necessarily being intentionally unfair to British Speedway. They're just looking after themselves in terms of their contracts and the commercial side of things.
I think the financial consideration, Derek's a massive part of it. But also I think that, you know, like Carl was saying and Lawrence was, you know, you want to race with the best. You want to race in the best leagues. You want to race with the best riders. Now, if you look at an average Polish league match, you've maybe got 6-7 Grand Prix riders in one meeting. So you can imagine lining up alongside Bartosz at one side, maybe Anders Thompson, Brady Kurtz, you know, in a big track in Poland, or you can race at Armadale, and it can be a wet, dreary night, and it can be a little bit miserable, and you've maybe not got the same sort of class or quality of rider than you would have in Poland. And I think a lot of it now is definitely down to the pool of the racing league, the actual quality of the racing, and the finances. You know, the UK has always been a country where I think if you want to be world champion, you need to race in the UK. Obviously, Bartosz is abolished that, but I think the British racing is unfortunately at the bottom of the pile just now. You look at the prioritising, and it's Poland, Sweden. I mean, Denmark. You know, you've still got Italy to fling in there as well. It's starting to come through with some riders, and I just think that British Speedway, it's unfortunately it's at the bottom of the pecking order, and I think there's a lot of different reasons why, financially and obviously the quality as well. I think as well.
No, that makes sense. Carol, to bring you back in, our mutual big mate Simon Lambert has mentioned before on 360 that there are non-British riders who base themselves here in the UK. They value the way of life here in this country and the visa entitlement above having British Speedway at heart. Now, Simon, it seems quite convinced that is the case in some quarters. Are these then the same riders who from time to time are likely to be highlighted as not equally valuing British Speedway?
Yeah, obviously, you know, obviously the Aussie boys, they have to come in, they and get their visas. They have to be here for so long, you know, to keep their visa. Their visa allows them then to ride in Poland, and obviously in Sweden, Denmark, if they're the leagues that they want to do. We all know that obviously Poland pay the most money. We've known over the years that Sweden was probably the second highest, and then you got the UK and Denmark that were on a bit of a par. And the thing is, what we have to look at is these riders that ride for Polish teams. If they don't turn up for a Polish team, they get massive fines. I'm not just saying like a couple £100. These are getting fines of thousands of pounds if they don't turn up to meetings, even if they don't turn up to their practice events that they have to have, for a race weekend. They get massive fines. So for these riders, if they're not riding in Poland or not part of the team for whatever reason, whether it's their own fault or not, they get fined for it. We don't see that. People don't see that, but this is what's happened. So this is why riders will prioritise Poland potentially over the UK. Now, the only other thing is, obviously, if there's a Polish fixture or an English fixture, British fixture that's been put into the fixture list after the fixtures have been put out. So when they're done in November, if there's a fixture then added in, if it clashes with a Polish meeting, Poland takes preference of that rider. So with the cups, with the playoffs, anything like that, if them dates have moved and they clash them with a Polish team for whatever reason on a Monday night, if there's a call off in Poland, then it's running on to a Monday. Poland takes preference of that rider. That is a contract between Poland and British Speedway. So that's not a rider contract. That's a contract that's where we are in the pecking order with the Poles. They take preference of our riders if they're signed to a Polish team. We have to accept that. We've given them the opportunity to do that. We've offered that up to them to take on different race nights. The Monday and the Thursday, obviously Poland are spreading out. But that's where we've sold ourselves out as British Speedway to Poland. Now, that's not a supporter's doing. That's not a rider's doing. That's purely, the boys at the top that have given in to Poland. And we didn't want to when we was at the AGM. We didn't want to give in to the Poles, but we had no opportunity at the time to do anything other than that, and it was voted on by everybody. As everything is, and it was voted that obviously the riders that are signed for Polish teams, the Polish teams take preference over them, and unfortunately that's where we are as British Speedway, and until we can either fend for ourselves and don't need these riders that are riding in Poland, we're going to be in that position, unfortunately.
No, that makes sense, Carla. And
I'm guessing that's the.
Go on, Lawrence.
I'm guessing that's the case tomorrow with Jason Doyle and Adam Ellis are riding in Denmark, which apparently takes priority because Ipswich have got a couple of guests. So I'm taking that's the case for that, obviously.
Mm.
Because we're like, obviously there's matches on tonight, or should have been obviously Sheffield tonight. That's an off race night, so. They would, if there was a Polish meeting or a Swedish meeting or anything tonight, then riders wouldn't have been in the UK. And if the fixtures, like the fixture for tomorrow, has been added in, then if they'd already got a pre-planned fixture elsewhere, that takes preference over, unfortunately, us. And that's why you tend to find that we have riders missing. Even sometimes if it is on a race night that we're meant to have, and that's that, like I say, that's where we are. That's where we are in the pecking order of Speedway, unfortunately. And it's hard to take because we want to see your team riders riding for your team, and if they're riding abroad somewhere, people go, well, why are they doing that when they should be riding for us? That is the reason why. There's no hidden agenda from the riders. They would want to do English League. They would want to do Polish League. They would want to do Danish League, Swedish League. They would want to do all of them because for them, they're losing money, aren't they? If them boys are on a guarantee at Ipswich, they've lost that money, haven't they? Because they've gone and raced somewhere else that, it could have been fitted in on a different night, but unfortunately, that's where we're at.
So the R360 is a symptom of the current international agreements, and I guess, Carol, the financial profile, respectively. So 360 speed. So hopefully that covered, maybe not fully, but it'll have prodded some of the whys and wherefores around missing riders and some of the accusations sometimes that riders are putting British Speedway second. It's not always the case. Sometimes they're in an impossible situation contractually, etc. And to Carol's point, international agreements, etc. Often come into play as well. If you have any comments in relation to that particular topic, please, you know what to do. Get interactive, drop us a comment on our YouTube channel or else on any social media post related to this discussion.